to know everything. Who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but I like it's new what you're telling me.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of State of the Pels. I'm Chrissy Smith, and I am joined with a very special guest today, Kevin Sweeney, who is a writer for Sports Illustrated. He focuses on college basketball and the draft. So Kevin, thank you so much for joining today.
Appreciate you guys having me.
No problem. So we'll kind of get things started. I want to give a little recap on the Pelicans right now. They won 11 games. They won 4 of their last 5 games. The one game they lost was by a point to the Boston Celtics. So they're starting to do what we were thinking that they would do when they had some healthy players. And right now they're missing Herb Jones and Brandon Ingram, but everybody else is firing on all cylinders. Zion's looking great. So from your perspective and what you hear in your circles and all, what is kind of the talk about when you have a team that could be, a good team if they're healthy, but they're struggling, and then the draft picks always come into play. So what are you hearing with all that?
Yeah, look, it's a tricky situation because I don't think the Pelicans entered the year on a tanking trajectory, if you will, right? Like there's teams that come into the year like angling for 2025 draft wise, and I think the Pels sort of expected to contend. It's been kind of a what can go wrong, will go wrong year, and those are frustrating. And now, of course, once you bottom out, now you start winning. It's sort of catch-22, right? I think for where the organization is, like the focus should still be winning games. Right? You have to figure out what you have with this nucleus and whether it's worth building around for the future. But obviously, being near the top of this draft class, which is a very talented group, and potentially being in the ping pong ball race for Cooper Flag is an exciting thing and can speak your fortune. Honestly, it's probably a similar situation to what Atlanta was in last year, where Atlanta was you sort of felt like their franchise was stuck. Raises up the lottery, gets the number 1 pick. You obviously would be much more excited to win the number 1 pick this draft with Flag than you would be in last draft, which was perceived as a pretty weak one. But for the most part, I think sometimes when you sort of get stuck in the middle of things, and I think that's where the Pelicans are. So a big few months, big year ahead for where they're going as a franchise direction-wise.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And obviously there's so much talk about Cooper Flag and, where could he potentially end up? And I mean, I know you've watched him plenty. What's your take on him as a player?
He's a lot of fun to watch. I first saw him 2023 summer, so about a year and a half ago at Peach Jam. He was 16, playing on his local AAU team. All these kids from Maine that were taking on the best of the best in the country. I mean, most of these AAU teams, for people who aren't in the weeds, essentially the best players often team up guys from different states, whatever, all kind of grouped together. And Cooper kept his old guard together and somehow led them to the semifinals, and he was just absurd. Like the way he impacted the game on every possession was something very rare. Like you see guys who could really score, you see guys who can really block shots, you see every skill. His ability every possession to do something that contributed to winning was special and has translated to every level. It's translated to the highest levels of high school basketball. It translated to Duke, translated to the USA basketball stuff he did last summer in Olympic prep in Vegas that turned a lot of NBA heads. So I think he's really come along. The question with him has always sort of been, can he be like an alpha NBA scorer? Is he someone that you're going to build your offense around in the NBA as a number 1 option, or is he sort of a elite second, third guy who can impact the game in a number of ways as a defender, as a passer, as a rebounder, and also scored a little bit? I think you've started to see those scoring instincts come along, which has been really exciting. I think the thing people forget sometimes with him is he is still so young. I mean, he was the youngest player in college basketball at the start of the season, was 17 for the first month and a half. So when he was turning the ball over against Kentucky and Atlanta and everybody's freaking out, it's like the kid is 17. Like he's got some time. And since his 18th birthday, it's been even better than he was to start the year. So the ceiling is really, really high. He is certainly the favorite as of now to go number 1. Never say never. Could someone else overtake him? But I would imagine that most NBA teams right now, from what I've gathered, would see him as the clear number 1 player in this class.
Yeah, and I think looking back on some of the draft picks that the Pelicans have had, obviously, getting Zion as the number 1 pick, that was super exciting. It hasn't panned out the way everyone was hoping because of all of the injuries. But talking about last year's draft pick, I mean, the Pelicans they drafted Yves Missi, and I mean, he's been outstanding rookie of the year candidate now. And I think a lot of people were not expecting that, but he has gotten a lot of minutes because of the injury. So it just does go to show you that there are guys sometimes who aren't drafted super high up there, but they still have a high ceiling where they can grow a lot. And have you watched much of Missi this year, or what were you expecting for him coming into this season?
Yeah, I think he's exceeded my expectations. I liked him as a prospect. I thought I thought he was raw. Like I thought he was going to need more time. I thought he was going to play in the G League a lot in his first year in the NBA. I nearly called him a freshman. I don't know. It's a college basketball. Yep. But I thought there were certainly moments at Baylor that indicated, maybe there could be something here in terms of him climbing boards and being like a top 5 to 10 rookie in this class, which he has been. I just wasn't sure we'd see the consistency that we've seen from him. And again, part of it is getting thrown in the fire. Sometimes it can be really hard, but sometimes it can be the best thing for a guy like him, especially as a guy who hasn't played a ton of basketball in his life, right? He's still pretty new to the game, and I think that that's been an interesting challenge for teams. Is what is too much to put on a young guy like that, and for the most part, he's handled it incredibly well. So. And in a tough season, by all accounts in New Orleans, the fact that you can look up and say, all right, we have a piece we feel like we can build around another young addition to our nucleus, that's really exciting. And the hope would be that in this draft class, you're able to add another kind of cornerstone, young, controllable asset in addition to the older guys that have been there for a while.
Who do you see as a team that could really benefit maybe the most from Cooper Flagg if he does go number 1?
I would say Washington, probably just from the standpoint of they're probably the most directionless team in the NBA right now, right? Like they are aggressively bad in many respects. And I was talking to an NBA scout yesterday, and he said, it's been really challenging evaluating some of their young players, right? Like Bub Carrington and Sarr and the guys that they picked in last year's draft, because it's just such an uncompetitive environment that they're in. Like, it's so clear that there's no infrastructure towards winning right now in Washington. And again, that's by design. They inherited a really bad cap situation, pick situation. It had to get worse before it got better. But when you do that, when you push the chips in to say we're going to lose, you hope that you're rewarded with an elite level prospect. And Cooper would certainly qualify for that.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that there. Who do you see maybe at this point that would, I feel like the Pelicans, they've got a really good starting 5 when healthy, a pretty deep bench. So what kind of piece do you think that the Pelicans could use maybe for the draft for this year?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's a lot of avenues to go. Personally, I'm almost always a best player available guy, although, I would probably caveat that with the fact that, in New Orleans' position, if they're hoping to contend right away, that maybe you are a little bit more positionally inclined. Maybe even think about trading the pick and seeing what you can do that way to add a vet. I do think adding a ball handler, a guy who could create in ball screens, would be where I would be naturally kind of leaning, right? You have Murray and CJ McCollum, but I think personally, I'd probably be more of the interest of the Dylan Harpers and Kasparis Yakashonises of the world. Nolan Traore is another guy. There's 3 or 4 really good ball handling pick and roll guards in this draft that I think could really help New Orleans. And again, if you're thinking kind of dual timeline, right? How do we contend now, and how do we think about this long-term core with guys like Missi? Well, the perfect guy to pair with him would be a pick and roll point guard, right? And there's 3 really good ones in this draft, in my opinion. So that's what I would be thinking about. But again, it when you get into these sort of parallel path situations that New Orleans has found themselves in, nothing is off the table. And I think you have to enter the draft with that mindset of like, all right, like what can we do to get the best asset possible to build this franchise back?
Right. And also it's going to come down to, is everybody healthy?
Right.
What are we looking at from that standpoint? And also the whole Brandon Ingram situation. I mean, are they going to possibly trade him before the deadline? Are we going to sign him to the max deal that he wants? Like that's all going to play a part in, Pelicans end up drafting. So that's really interesting. It's good insight there on it. Let's talk a little bit about college basketball. It's been an exciting season so far. My LSU Tigers are struggling. They've got a good team, but they're not really up there in the mix. So, but what's exciting to you with the college season this year, and what do you think come March Madness time?
Yeah, it's been hard for LSU because maybe the big story in college basketball is that the SEC is so darn good. I mean, this is the best it has ever been. I've talked to people who feel like this iteration of the SEC is the best year for any conference in the history of college basketball. Which I think if you told someone 10 years ago that the SEC would be the dominant force in basketball, they wouldn't have. They would looked at you like you had six heads. Like we're 8 years removed from the SEC putting 3 teams in the NCAA tournament. This year, it's more likely to get 13. Like they could be in that mix. So it's been incredible. The top with Auburn, certainly Auburn's the best team in the country in my estimation. But Tennessee and Kentucky and Alabama and Florida, like there's 5 in my eyes national title contenders in one conference. That's a scary thought. I think the top of the sport's really interesting and strong with all those teams, with Duke, with Flag. I mean, Duke has won 11 in a row now, and could easily be on something like a 25 game win streak entering the NCAA tournament, which would be pretty historic and set the stage for some interesting March storylines. Certainly the biggest program in the sport. Potentially riding a 25 game win streak with the biggest name in the sport in Cooper, like that would be a lot of fun. And then obviously the three-peat race for UConn and Dan Hurley, winners of the last 2 national titles, dominant in the NCAA tournament. Do they have another trick up their sleeve? Haven't been as good this year as they were the last 2, but with the way that they're coached and with the shooting that they have, you can never count them out.
Yeah. And let me ask you, I'm sure you've been to Duke UNC games and the rivalry there and just that environment. I feel like some of the SEC matchups get pretty intense as well. What would you say are some of like maybe your top 2 or 3 games that you've been to, like matchups that are so competitive in that environment?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I will say I'm a Midwest guy. I live in Chicago. Purdue, Indiana is as like supercharged a rivalry as there is. Obviously, Duke Carolina is its own sort of entity, and the history that comes with it is incredible. But Purdue, Indiana is right up there. I was actually at Iowa State the other night for Iowa State, Kansas. That was a monster atmosphere. That's one of the great buildings, and obviously, Duke is certainly up there. Kansas is as good an atmosphere as you'll find, and I think with blue bloods like that, sometimes the cool part is seeing every time they go on the road, the best shot you get from some of these fan bases. And I think that's, kind of, you mentioned, the SEC and some of the atmospheres there. Like, I think one of the things that's been really cool is, I think schools that have just such great, football tradition and tailgating and everything, starting to embrace basketball in the same way. And like you turn on, it's not just Kentucky anymore. Like Vandy has a sellout today against Tennessee. It's going to be a monster deal. Alabama, fills its gym. Auburn has one of the best atmospheres in college basketball now. Again, something if you said 10 years ago, people would have looked at you like you were crazy.
Yeah.
So that to me has been really cool, and it's something I think will continue to grow here over the next several years as SEC basketball continues to thrive.
Well, that's great, and we love our SEC all teams here, so it's great to be a powerhouse in basketball. Definitely feels good. So okay, one last question I'm going to ask you, not sports related at all, because I know you're from New York and you live in Chicago now. We are about to have a winter storm down here in deep South Louisiana. They're saying we're going to get up to 6 inches of snow. They're like shutting everything down. What recommendations do you have for us down here so we can handle this?
Man, I wish I had better advice. I mean, look, we're spoiled because like when there's a big snowstorm, there's salt trucks and like everything's prepared, the plows. That's the big issue. Like if I could teleport down and bring you guys all the stuff we have up in New York or in Chicago, like it'd all be fine. But no, I'll tell you a good story. In like about 10 years ago, I was with my family. We were driving cross country from Texas to New York with a bunch of furniture and carrying a U-Haul. And we got stuck in a February ice storm in Alabama. They were so no one has ever been less prepared for a storm than Alabama was that day. Like every car was stuck on the side of the road. The tow truck guy like came by. I was like, oh yeah, we'll be out there in like 6 hours or so. We're like, oh, good luck. So I would say if the roads near you are at all icy, stay home. That's the good advice from me.
Good. Well, yeah, they're already shutting everything down. School's closed. Like we can't go anywhere. So it's all work from home. But thank you so much for being on today, Kevin. You just have so much knowledge. It's really great to talk to you and appreciate your expertise on this. We love our Pelicans team down here. We're hoping that we get better. And if we need a high draft pick, so be it. So we'll see what happens. But thank you so much for joining today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye.